Tons of news happened this week. We're going to talk about all of it. Links to everything will be in the description, but let's start with this. So I think Nvidia has finally been, they probably watch all the reviews. They take a list of, here's the complaints people have about Nvidia. If people complain about the price, they just laugh at, they will just roll in the profits. But if people complain about other things, I think it bothers them. And one of the things that people, myself included, have highlighted as something we actually prefer about AMD GPUs has been that the AMD driver software has looked much more modern, runs quicker, and has a lot of features built into it, and all of the features are in one place, and it doesn't require a login. So Nvidia, on the other hand, had their driver features kind of split into two apps. They had a really old control panel that has been the same for, since I was in high school, maybe even before that. It's been a long time. And it looks very outdated, but was very functional. There was a lot of stuff, you could get to it, people were used to it. I get why they'd be hesitating to change it, but also, it was very slow to use. It just kind of feels slow when you click buttons and things like that. But then they had their more modern-looking Geforce Experience app, which had some of their other, tools and features. But that one required a login, which is annoying and kind of can feel a little bit like, why do they need to track me through my account and all of that? So that was a complaint. And the things were separated, all of that. And so Nvidia seems to be responding to that criticism by launching an Nvidia app, which will eventually replace both of those other apps, the control panel and Geforce Experience, and it will not require a login unless you're on a specific tab. But it's also introducing some other cool features, which I want to highlight here. So this is a simulated image that Nvidia is showing off, and the problem is, showing off HDR content is extremely difficult because you can't count on the people watching your content to have an actual HDR screen, and even if they have a screen that claims to be HDR, it probably sucks if it's a monitor unless it happens to be a very recent high-end monitor. Because a lot of screens that say they support HDR 400, it's not real HDR. They support an HDR signal. But anyway, that's kind of beside the point, other than if you have a good HDR screen, you could be frustrated that a lot of PC games don't have HDR implementations. Now, Windows itself tries to do auto HDR, which works in some games and not others, and works well in some games and not well in some of the games that it does support. So it can be a bit of hit or miss. So Nvidia's launching, as part of this Nvidia app, RTX HDR. Now, if you want a really good look at this, which I don't have time to get into here, Digital Foundry, I think it was about a week or so ago, did a video testing this out before it was officially released because modders figured out that you could activate this in the last NVIDIA driver before this was actually officially released by NVIDIA. But now you actually can activate it through this new NVIDIA app, and it uses apparently some kind of AI-trained algorithm running on the Tensor cores. And if you do watch the Digital Foundry coverage on this, there is a performance cost to using this, but it's not massive. If I remember right off the top of my head, it's like 4%-ish or something like that. At least on the GPU that was being tested. Anyway, the point is, at a small performance hit, because it's running on your on your Tensor cores, you can add HDR to games. Now, this, again, not really a great way of showing it off in a non-HDR video, that kind of a thing. But the point is, it actually looks quite good. It can handle color banding issues better than Auto HDR does, and it can also apply to games that Auto HDR doesn't. So I think this is a really cool new feature from NVIDIA, and it's not the only new feature being added in here. They're also adding in a Dynamic Vibrance, which is apparently a more AI-trained version of a digital vibrance feature, which could be to your taste. In this picture they're showing off here, I'm like, well, it makes it look like it's brighter outside, but I'm not sure that's the intent of the scene. But anyway, some people will probably like that more color-saturated, vibrant look. So there's a lot of stuff happening in this driver. Another big change is the overlay itself that you activate. Is a lot more customizable and also runs more on the side of the screen, so it's not necessarily taking up the whole display. So I think overall, this looks like a major overhaul. And like I said, putting everything in one place, at least eventually. Right now, not everything has been moved to the app, but that is the end goal, and the app is currently in beta. And also, the only place where you'll need to log in is if you go into the redeem screen, where you would be like using codes and getting rewards and things like that, where it would make sense to tie that to some sort of an account. But you can do your driver updates and activate all your other features without requiring that. So I am overall very happy with them making this move, with my only slight concern being the fact that this will eventually replace their old-fashioned control panel. And I'll be clear, I have criticized the old-fashioned control panel for looking outdated and being kind of slow, but it's also nice how in its nested menus, everything is very accessible, and also people who have been on their PCs for a long time know where everything is, right? So this will take some adjustment, and I'm hoping that they can still make everything very quickly accessible, like it is through the old control panel, if you know what it is. So anyway, it's nice to see NVIDIA responding to this, kind of updating things, and it looks like listening to a lot of feedback, and I'm interested to see what this looks like as it moves past the beta stage and gets fully fleshed out. Now, NVIDIA has listened to some feedback, but not always about pricing, like I said. However, the pricing of the 4080 Supers, which was supposed to be, $200 less than the 4080 non-Supers, and that was the whole point, because the GPU itself wasn't really more than 2 or 3% faster, they weren't really in stock. Well, on NVIDIA's website, and now I've been tracking this since yesterday, and they're starting to sell out on NVIDIA's website, so by the time you see this video, these may or may not still be available. But I will say, for the last 24 hours or so, you've been able to get MSRP or near MSRP models of the 4080 Super right around that $1,000 price point. So this is at least showing that it seems like while the initial wave of MSRP models did sell out and has been out of stock for a while, it's looking like we are getting them some waves back in stock. So it's hopeful, a good sign that the $1,000 4080 Supers might actually be a thing once we get some more shipments in and this stabilizes. Now, speaking of pricing, it's looking like in the China region, we're seeing the 4070 and 4060 Ti Founders Edition GPUs seeing their cards reduced below MSRP. And it's looking like by the, I think, official NVIDIA retailers that sell their Founders Editions. So that's at least kind of interesting, although that is just that region. So not quite sure what's going on there. Now, in that region, it's looking like AMD has the opposite approach, which is apparently to crack down on retailers selling their RX 6750 GRE edition below the MSRP pricing, which, okay. I mean, one issue could be the fact that the 6750 GRE puts strong competition up against AMD's new 7600 XT, and AMD has apparently paused the launch of the 7600 XT in China while they're cracking down on the 6750 GRE pricing. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the 6750 GRE, I wouldn't blame you. That is a Chinese-only product at this point. But what is it? Well, it's basically a 6700 XT. Now there's two versions of it. There's a 10 gigabyte version, which is basically just a renamed 6700 10 gigabyte. And then there is a 12 gigabyte version, which is effectively just a 6700 XT, which is a 12 gigabyte card. Now, what's interesting about these is their MSRPs are actually very attractive. The 6750 GRE 12 gigabyte, which again is just a 6700 XT basically, at a $289 MSRP, if we could get that pricing in the US market, for example, I think this would definitely be my recommended GPU under $300, just like the 6700 XT was when it was available for around $300. So it would be really exciting to get that. I would be much more likely to recommend that over a 16 gigabyte but slower 7600 XT. So I don't know. This price point just feels really weird for AMD right now. And I think it's interesting that apparently they are implementing fines for retailers selling these cards below their MSRPs, which at least that's according to My Drivers, which is being reported here by Video Cards, who looks like they might have got the info from WCCF Tech. So, you know, the chain of information out of that region, but interesting stuff. Now, speaking of the Chinese GPU market, the Chinese GPU brand that's trying to get going in this space, the More Threads GPUs, is launching their entry-level product with the MTT S30, which is apparently not going to provide a lot of gaming performance, but it's only $55. And apparently it's mostly being advertised as taking the video encoding and decoding work off of your CPU, which I guess it might be okay for that. But if you aren't aware, basically for gaming purposes, these GPUs are dramatically underperforming, and not only underperforming, their support for games is extremely low. However, it has been improving with driver updates, and apparently in some of the most recent reviews, gaming performance has apparently doubled since launch as drivers have been updated. But in general, I think these are still kind of like I don't know, let's check back in 10 years and see what's happened if they're still going and what's going on there. And again, right now, that's really only even potentially interesting in the Chinese market. Now, in other AMD news, we're seeing more FSR3 implementations, which is really good, because when it first launched, like, it took a while to get it, launched in a couple of games, took a long time past then to get anywhere. Although the version we've got now works better than the initial implementations with better variable refresh rate support. And now we're starting to see the pace of games getting updated with FSR3 really picking up. So Starfield has now fully launched its FSR3 update, which also has an XeSS update as well, which is pretty interesting because XeSS can often provide better upscaling than FSR does, although sometimes at more of a performance cost, or in other words, less of a performance boost from the upscale. But anyway, it's looking like to celebrate, there is a giveaway going on for a Starfield-themed 7900 XTX and 7800 X3D. Now, I know that people are less excited about Starfield now than they were before it launched, but I think some people would still be interested in that prize. So again, you can follow my links in the description. This isn't like a promo. I'm just letting you know it's here. This is not any kind of sponsored content or anything. Mostly letting you know that the FSR3 update's out, but there's also that giveaway. Now, this is not the only game getting FSR3 support added right now. We're also seeing Sons of the Forest launching with FSR3. And you might be like, didn't that game launch a long time ago? No, it was available in early access. The game has now actually launched, or in other words, exited early access, and it has done so with FSR3 support, which is cool to see. So where does that leave us now? That means that we now have 15 games with FSR3 implementations officially. And yeah, there's a bunch of mods available to mod it into games that don't have official support. And it looks like the pace is now, again, continuing to pick up since the initial launch, and that's good to see. However, not every game that's promised it is actually delivering. Nightingale, in their pre-launch updates, mentioned that FSR3 support, which had been promised, is being removed, at least for now. They're saying that after reviewing crash data from the server stress test, a significant number of them seem to point to FSR3 integrations, happening with the crashes. So, and that could be whether or not users actually had the setting turned on. So something about having FSR3 in the game was messing with their game code. I'm not saying that's the fault of FSR3, but their implementation of it seemed to be causing some sort of crashing. So it says they've temporarily removed FSR3 from the launch build, but they're working with external and internal teams. I'm wondering if external teams would be AMD trying to help out to see if they can implement it, or maybe an older FSR version, but they had to pull it kind of last minute at launch. Now, this is kind of a bit of a side note, but this is not the only game where frame generation, and I'm not even just talking FSR3, seems to have caused some stability issues. I know that with DLSS 3 frame generation, it was causing stability issues in a couple, I think they were mostly Unreal Engine 5 games. Like Lords of the Fallen launched with DLSS 3 frame generation, and then in a patch, they removed it because they were saying that they were seeing a lot of crashes tied to DLSS 3 frame generation. And I know when I tested out RoboCop at launch, when I had DLSS 3 frame generation enabled, I was experiencing more crashes than when I didn't have it enabled. So anyway, just something to kind of look at there. But anyway, still good to see a lot of games getting those additions. Now, in other AMD news, we're seeing it reported that Lisa Su, AMD CEO, will be hosting the opening keynote for Computex 2024. That'll be happening on June 3rd. Now, usually a big keynote address like that would be a good place to announce, not necessarily actually launch, but at least announce and give some information about a big hardware launch. Now, the next hardware launch that would make sense would be the next generation of Ryzen CPUs. And I'm seeing other reports that the Zen 5, the next generation of Ryzen CPUs, are being made on TSMC's 3nm process in Q2 and mass production launching up in Q3. So those reports seem to tie together to indicate that we will probably, although not guaranteed, get the Zen 5 announcement on June 3rd. But again, that's not a guarantee. It's just probably what to expect. So that would be your next generation of Ryzen CPUs. Now, if you're into it for the gaming stuff and you're holding out for the X3D chips, which we usually get, those are generally delayed by several months. So it wouldn't surprise me if you had to wait until Q4 or even Q1 of 2025 before getting those X3D variants. So it could still be a while. So anyway, that's what we've got there. Now in keynote address news, it's being announced that Nvidia is going to have the keynote address with their CEO, Jensen Huang, at GTC 2024. So that would be happening fairly soon. That would be March 18th. And Nvidia is promoting the event as the #1 AI conference for developers. So there certainly sounds like they will have an AI focus, which doesn't surprise me because right now, honestly, as much as I kind of hate it since my focus is gaming GPU stuff, it's looking like Nvidia's big profits are happening right now around the the AI space, and AI is a big deal right now. For example, we're seeing news that Nvidia posts 769 nice percent annual profit growth in Q4, and shares soar by 10% on that news. To give you an idea of how profitable they are, that 10% growth is being reported as Nvidia gaining almost the entire market cap of AMD following that earnings report, okay? So just that growth after the earnings report, that dollar amount is almost the entire market cap of AMD. So Nvidia's AI business is absolutely exploding right now, which does kind of make the GPU situation, I mean, they're still, like I said, they're still doing things like they're updating their app and all of that, but if you're desperate for them to cut prices, they're able to sell that silicon for a lot of money in the AI space. So just, it'll be what it is. Now, in other kind of AI-related news, so AMD is also kind of doubling down on that, and we're seeing these NPUs being reported as a big thing that AMD and Intel are working on adding to their CPUs to better support AI apps that don't really exist yet, but are probably in development, right? That's kind of where these are at. Now, AMD on their blog is announcing that an upcoming Windows Task Manager update will add NPU monitoring for their Ryzen 8040 series of processors. So their 8040 series launched with NPUs. The NPUs, the neural processing units, can accelerate some AI tasks. So now if you open up your task manager, at least after this update, you know how you can usually see, your CPU usage and your GPU usage. It'll also report your NPU usage. So you could see if, you actually have an app that makes use of your NPU, which right now is probably no. But if you read through their blog, they're kind of saying like, there's a lot of things in development. AI is exploding right now. There's a lot of software being developed for it. So eventually that'll probably be tied into more basic, Windows type tasks. At least that's the, where the companies are trying to go with all of this. I'm curious what we'll end up seeing, because my issue with all of this is like, these aren't super powerful yet. So what can you do locally? Because the real powerful AI stuff is still better run like in a cloud server somewhere. So we'll have to kind of see what comes of all that. But anyway, kind of interesting. We'll be seeing that available in the Windows Task Manager. Now, what about Intel? A lot about AMD and Nvidia so far. What about Intel? Well, Intel hopes to make AMD chips. That's their next big business move. well, actually, it's kind of a split in Intel's business. So Intel looks like they're going to be spinning off their Intel Foundry business as like a separate financial entity that is open to all customers. They would love to produce AMD silicon. They would love to produce stuff for Nvidia. They would love to produce their own stuff, and they would love to produce stuff from Google, whoever. If you read the actual quote from Pat Gelsinger talking about this, he says, well, if you go back to the picture I showed today, Paul, apparently he's being asked by Paul, there are Intel products and Intel Foundry. So there's Intel products, like their CPUs and GPUs and all that, and then there's Intel Foundry, which produces chips. There's a clean line between those, and as I said on the last earnings call, we'll have a separate legal entity for Intel Foundry this year. So this year, Intel's planning on setting that up separately as a separate legal and financial entity. We'll start posting separate financials associated with that going forward. And the Foundry's team objective is simple: fill the fabs, deliver to the broadest set of customers on the planet. So he's saying, we hope that includes Nvidia, Qualcomm, Google. They already announced it includes Microsoft, and they're hoping it'll even include AMD moving forward. Now, we'd have to see if AMD is interested in that, and all that, but he's saying they want to be the foundry of the world, and if we're going to be the Western foundry at scale, we can't be discriminating about who's participating in that. So he's basically explaining why Intel is actually hoping to start producing chips for their competitors in the chip space, because that would be good for their Intel Foundry business. They want to take all the business they can get, fill up the fabs, get the business. Now let's move on to some monitor news. So I saw this from Monitors Unboxed. You guys know, and I think I even mentioned at the beginning of the video, possibly when I was talking about HDR stuff, I'm a huge fan of OLED monitors, and the next thing I'm extremely interested in is the 4K 240Hz OLEDs that are coming out this year, and a couple of them have just launched. I already reported on the Asus model, but MSI's model was originally having a lower price tag at launch, and it was going to be promotional. But according to this info from Monitors Unboxed, they've decided to change their mind and offer their previously just temporarily lowered pricing as the permanent price, which means that their 32-inch 4K 240Hz QD-OLED will be officially priced at $950, which is significantly below what we saw for the Asus product. And also, it's my understanding that MSI has given 3-year burn-in warranties on their OLED monitors. That's being their policy here. So if that makes this one incredibly interesting. And also, on that note, Monitors Unboxed did just publish their review of that 4K 240Hz QD-OLED. So I would highly recommend taking a look at this review. It's, not that everything's always perfect, but it is overall looks like a very good product. The general, OLED caveats regarding, if you're going to be using it with static images doing, productivity for 8 hours a day, that might not be the best technology. But, for gaming, this looks very, very interesting. Now, again, later this year, we will be seeing the WOLED based 240 hertz 4K 32-inch screens. And those look like they'll be offering a 480 hertz mode if you drop to 1080p. And I'm very interested in that option. I'm also looking at which of these OLEDs are going to offer the more forward-thinking DisplayPort 2.1 connectivity. So that's another thing to keep your eye out on. Although, with this display stream compression, it's probably not that big of a deal. But still. Anyway, a lot of things to keep an eye on in the space. Now, how about this, though? PlayStation VR2 headsets have been extremely cool headsets, but if you're interested in PC gaming rather than PlayStation gaming, that's been really disappointing because it's been a really intriguing headset. There's been a lot of kind of mod work that I've followed trying to get some PC support and things like that. I haven't followed it super closely, but it's looking like PlayStation VR2 will get official PC support this year, confirmed directly by Sony, not leaks and rumors. And that is absolutely huge news. And apparently this is coming from an official PlayStation blog post, which isn't, this isn't the headline of it, but if you kind of dig around in that blog post, they do mention the coming to PC. So that's pretty cool, and it's official. In other PlayStation news, we're seeing more talk about the PlayStation 5 Pro. There's been a lot of rumors about PS5 Pro. Now, it's looking like this latest update coming from a CNBC analyst saying that Sony is likely to release a refreshed PS5 Pro version this year. And that could help because Sony recently revealed that PlayStation 5 sales have slowed down and they didn't meet their targets. And that kind of is expected as you get a few years into the console's life cycle. So one way to boost sales would be to offer new hardware. So PS5 Pro could be a way of getting there. Now, also, that would be coming out a little bit before GTA 6. So, a big gaming excitement with GTA 6, people might finally be like, okay, I want to upgrade my console for that, and offering the most powerful hardware for playing it with the PS5 Pro version could make sense. And so what are we expecting hardware-wise for that? So we did get some rumors about it, but again, it's very unclear how reliable these rumors are at this point. However, the best rumors we have so far would be that it would be a 60 compute unit GPU. Now, compared to the PS5, which is a 36 compute unit GPU, that is a massive upgrade if that is what we get, although the memory configuration would still be on a 16 gigabyte, a 256-bit bus, although the rumor was that it might move from 14 gigabit per second memory to 18 gigabit per second memory, giving it also a memory bandwidth boost in addition to the massive number of compute units upgraded. But again, this is still, at this point, just a rumor. So don't take that hardware as a guarantee. Now, in other news, Xbox is confirming 4 games coming to Nintendo Switch and PlayStation platforms. We had this be a huge news thing for a while there, speculation on what's Xbox's future. Are they going multi-platform on everything? And it turned out to be these 4 games. So Grounded, Pentiment, Hi-Fi Rush, and Sea of Thieves. So we're not seeing the huge Xbox exclusives going that way, but trying to get some more money out of these titles. And as Microsoft bought so many big game publishers, they really need to make sure they can turn a profit on these games. Games are getting incredibly expensive to develop for. So expanding the market for those games might be something that's necessary. We see Sony talking about that as well, where they're looking at moving more stuff to PC and moving it sooner as a way to expand that business. And so, Microsoft is already on PCs, so now they're like, well, what about other consoles? But they're gonna walk a really fine line on, you still have to have a reason to buy an Xbox. So if there's no exclusives on Xbox, then it wouldn't really make sense to buy an Xbox if you could just buy a PlayStation to get their exclusives and all the Xbox games, right? So they're kind of walking that fine balancing point. In general, it's getting harder for exclusive games to make money. Because even if we look at the PlayStation news we had here, there's also reports that Sony is grappling with a big issue, that profit margins at its key gaming business are sitting near decade lows because it's getting more and more expensive to produce those big exclusive games. Anyway, I think that's what I got for you today. Huge thank you to viewers, huge thank you to subscribers, huge thank you to commenters, and especially huge thank you to channel members who have clicked the join button to directly support the channel financially. You also get cool little badges on your comments, and they're easier for me to find and reply to and all of that too. But anyway, huge thank you, but I do know that not everybody's in a financial position to do that. So that is absolutely okay and absolutely no pressure to do that. But huge thank you for those who did. And in general, I hope all of you, everyone, all of you has an excellent day.